If you have a kid in the Poudre School District, which I have 2, soon to be 3, this video is going to matter to you. If you're a buyer, seller, own property in Northern Colorado, the Poudre School District is a massive asset and resource to families living here. And this October, the Poudre School District is going to vote on whether they should be closing 2 to 10 schools in the area, which will take effect in 2027 to 2028 school year. So nothing over the next year, but this video is going to break it down, how we got here, what it's looking like, and as a homeowner and a home buyer, what you should expect and really strategize moving forward. Now, my name is Patrick Stoup, and this is the Fort Collins lifestyle video. If you or someone you know has a kid in the Poudre School District, this video is for them. Make sure to send it their way so that they're informed and can make informed decision. Let's go. On May 26th of this year, the Poudre School District voted 6-1 on officially approving the process moving forward on how and what to do as far as closing schools. These policies are called the FCB and FCBR and will dictate how these committees are going to decide on which schools to propose to close and consolidate. A group called the Comprehensive Planning Committee are going to spend essentially the entire summer diving deep into all the analytics, the Poudre School District dashboard, which there will be a link in our bio or a description that will lead you to that dashboard if you want to look for yourself. But essentially, they have gathered a ton of information, both current and expectations moving forward. And this group's going to spend a lot of time together really deciding some seriously impactful decisions. They're going to give a single recommendation on October 20th and could vote as soon as November 3rd on which schools to close and consolidate. And those changes, they won't take place in 2026 to 2027 school year, but they will take place in the 2027 to 2028 school year. Now, it's important to understand what happened just a couple years ago. In 2024, the Poudre School District came out and it seemed relatively sudden, where they came out and said, hey, listen, our enrollment's down, we need to close schools, our budget's up, we are behind, below budget, we're off, and we need to make some pretty serious decisions. They came out and it seemed like overnight recommended 3, 5 schools, some different scenarios and options, and there was a lot of infighting that began. They didn't seem to have a lot of data behind it. It felt like it was more, anecdotal information, nothing seriously to consider. And there was a lot of conversations between families and schools, protests. I remember I had one friend who had just moved into a neighborhood, partly because they had a neighborhood elementary and middle school that their kids could walk to, and their elementary school was on the chopping block. There had been protests of over 500 people. There were people arguing, yelling, and what they ended up doing was passing a mill levy to raise funds to temporarily fund the Poudre School District into the future. But a lot of these maintenance budgets are increasing. A lot of the enrollment is still declining. And these decisions need to be made. But hopefully now, with these committees in place and the decisions to move forward with kind of more of an analytical approach, single recommendation approach, by October 20th of this year, we will have a scope of schools that they are seriously considering and then voting on to close and consolidate. So why is this happening? Simple. Fewer kids, lower enrollment, basic demographers, expectations, and math. PSD enrolled 25,000 students in the school year of 2025 to 2026, but the year before was 25,500. So seriously, 500 less students in just one time year. And over another stretch, they lost 1,230 students. And the district's projections are suggesting that we could see a 2% enrollment drop over the next 5 years. And Colorado schools are funded on a per student basis. So a 2% drop in enrollment equates to a roughly $6 million drop in revenue from the state. The Poudre School District considers a healthy elementary with 400 or more students and a healthy middle school of 700 or more students enrolled in that school. And only 12 of the PSD's 28 non-charter schools have 3 or more classes per grade. And only 7 elementary schools have 400 or more students, and only 3 of the middle schools have 700 or more students. So there's more schools with less students running under the funding line and losing money really for the Poudre School District. Now, this isn't just a Poudre School District problem. This is really happening across the country, across Larimer County, Colorado, across the country, fewer birth rates, fewer students in schools, and funding issues across these public schools. So do your job, people. Have more babies. No, you can tell that to my wife because she's definitely on the train of wanting to have another baby, which we'll see if that actually happens. All right, now how are schools going to be decided which are closed? Because, in 2024, it didn't feel like there was real data. In fact, there were a lot of smart people where they were saying like, why are you choosing this school versus this school? This school has more students and the neighborhood around it seems to be growing. More kids are coming in, and this school is less students, less offerings. And so there was a lot of decisions that seemed like they didn't have a lot of thought behind them. But moving forward, the Poudre School District has criteria that they're going to look at. Number one, building utilization. How many students can the building hold, and how many students are actually there? What is the building utilization rate? Building condition and quality. How much deferred maintenance is there? Is there ADA accessibility? How repairable it is, what the recreation space is. So ultimately, building condition and quality is an important factor. And probably one of the most important factors is current and future enrollment. So not just today's count of where the students are, but future projections of where the students expect to be at which schools. But there's also going to be an equitable portion as well. Traffic, safety, and walkability. How much traffic is there? How walkable are the schools that are going to be closed and students moving to new ones? And safety, I think that's huge because, we were just talking about a bus route for our school just next year that they're moving it from the corner of the street that we were walking to, which just had one short crossing across the street, to all the way across one of the main arteries in Fort Collins. And yes, there is an underpass to get there, but the reality is our kids know how to use a crosswalk, and I really don't want to see them crossing these major intersections by themselves. So safety is a major component as well. Transportation and length of commute, there again has to be an equitable component. We can't just close all the schools in one area that maybe has the fewest amount of students in the area because, maybe they're going to be on the bus for nearly 3 hours. In fact, again, in 2024, there were people that were arguing saying, hey, listen, you're consolidating our school and our kid would spend nearly 3 hours on a bus if you did in fact do this. School programs and offerings, PE, art, music, extracurriculars, before and after school programs, early childhood care, advanced programs, and social and emotional support. Those are all things that schools want to be able to offer, but because, yes, we do have lower enrollment, lower funding, some schools are having to cut some of those programs, and not every school is created equally. Proximity of schools, and I think, my wife asked me, she's like, do you think our school, Werner, is on the chopping block? And I said, I'd love to say no because I love Werner Elementary, but the reality is we're close to Bacon, we're close to Cruz, and all three schools could seemingly consolidate, or at least one of those schools consolidate into the other because we're close enough. And Werner doesn't have air conditioning. I believe, one of the other two schools does. And we have to take into consideration that we are also potentially on the chopping block because of a lot of different things. But proximity of those schools is going to be one important consideration as well. Those are all going to be important things to consider that aren't just numbers based, but is a social and equitable component as well. And some things I'm kind of excited about because, the reality is like you want your kid to go to a school where they have all of the offerings in place and not one that maybe they're lacking because they don't have the funding for it. Now, Poudre School District in general has done an amazing job, has a great reputation because of all these extracurriculars, recreation, longevity of teachers who are teaching there. And so there are some things that I'm excited about being able to provide at all schools, not just some. Now, one of the questions that we all want to know is how many schools are closing. And at the May 26th meeting, they discussed 3 options. A phased approach, a Goldilocks approach, and an aggressive approach, really anywhere between 2 to 10 schools. The phased approach would look at between 2 to 3 schools starting in 2027 to 2028, kind of help with some funding issues, budget gap issues, and then also allow for kind of like a trial and error, like what did we do right and what did we do wrong and how can we correct that on the next 2 to 3 schools that close. I will say personally, I'm not a big fan of that option just because I'm like, let's rip the Band-Aid off to a certain degree, because one thing that I don't want to do personally is like, hey, listen, we closed 2 of the schools this year and your kid got pushed into another school. And now 3 years later, while they're still in 4th grade, maybe moving into 5th grade, the next phase is, well, your school again is on the chopping block. And so it's a potential that, maybe a student gets moved twice in the term of their elementary career. Now, another thing that I want to talk about is, I think one thing to take into consideration is, like, my wife, for example. She was a military brat. Her dad, moved around the country multiple times, born in Florida, elementary in Utah, or elementary in Florida and Utah, and then middle school and high school in Alaska, and now they live in California. So, I will say kids are adaptable and they will do great. Hopefully that you're able to support them. So I want to be optimistic about as much of this as I can, because yes, it's frustrating and I don't want to see this per se, but I think, you do got to make fiscal decisions to make sure, and equitable decisions as well. You don't want to be at a school in the Poudre School District that has so few of these offerings because they just don't have the funding, maybe an extra 5-minute commute or whatever that might be, to provide your kiddo the opportunity that all other kids in the Poudre School District are having. Now, the Goldilocks approach, anywhere between 4 to 7 schools closing in 2027 and 2028. There wouldn't be a second phase approach per se. They would look to make sure that funding is there. They do believe this could be a long-term solution, but it could ultimately result in another additional schools closing after that if the funding's not there, if the birth rates aren't there, if the student population doesn't be what it's intended and supposed to be. But hopefully 4 to 7 schools would do the trick. This is kind of where I think is where we should land. I always thought we'd be right around 5 schools between, maybe 3 to 4 elementaries and maybe 1 to 2 middle schools. And I think that would get the job done. The aggressive approach, closing anywhere between 8 to 10 schools. And this would secure the Poudre School District financially for over the next 10 years. Now, this would be a painful pill to swallow because there would be so many schools, middle and elementary, closing, and this could cause a lot of disruption. But the idea is pull the Band-Aid off once and not have to think about it for the next 10 to 20 years. Now, I think it's important to note, no one school has been identified, and the reality is like we can all lose sleep about it, stressing about it, but we will know soon enough. Because here's the timeline. Over this summer, this committee is going to get together. They're going to dive deep into numbers, all the analytical numbers, as well as the equitable considerations, and make a decision or recommendation to the board this coming October. In September of this year, the schools that are under consideration are going to be notified privately. And on October 20th, they are going to propose this formally. And we will see a notification 7 days prior to this meeting. So if this is something that you're seriously wanting to be involved with or knowledgeable about, you will know 7 days prior to the recommendation meeting, which is October 20th. And then possibly on November 3rd of this year, the board could vote. And then in 2027 to 2028, this is going to be when schools actually close and consolidate. One thing that isn't super certain at this time is how much community input will be had when these recommendations actually take place. And then the next phase, 5 and 6, is really an important phase as well, because I think this is where people can kind of take a step back, take a deep breath, and if they're concerned about their neighborhood, losing a school, phase 5 and 6 is really where we're going to decide what to do with the schools that they closed, whether that's repurposing, leasing it, selling it, turning it into an early childhood care center. I don't believe that these schools, because of what their asset value means to the school district, whether it becomes a Poudre School District administrative building, early childhood care center, a charter school takes that, or a privately, owned and operated school takes that, and the Poudre School District sells it, leases it. Those are all going to be decisions that are made after the closures take place and probably won't take effect for a couple of years. But I do believe, these schools and the lots and land that they sit on are valuable, and it'll be just an interesting thing for the Poudre School District to determine what they want to do with these buildings. But for me, it says, hey, listen, these aren't going to be, blighted pieces of property in the middle of Fort Collins. No, they will be repurposed, reused, and they will be an asset for that neighborhood. They just won't be an elementary or middle school. Because one thing to take into consideration, the Poudre School District has made it clear that when looking at the entirety of the Poudre School District, there's nearly $1 billion of maintenance that needs to take place on all of these buildings. And so getting a few of them out of your kind of pipeline or hopper that need to take place, or new mechanicals, an HVAC or an AC into these buildings, you're saying, hey, let's offload it, let's reuse it, let's repurpose it, and get other buildings that might be a little bit less expensive to operate, maintain, or retrofit up to snuff and kind of decrease that $1 billion burden. So what does this mean for families in Fort Collins? Because like for me, it's important. Like I said, I've got 2 kids in the Poudre School District system and a third on its way. And who knows, maybe a fourth one day. That's up for debate. But the reality is if your school, your elementary school has fewer than 400 kids, or your middle school has fewer than 700 kids, you are probably one of the main ones on the chopping block. And I want to be careful here because no specific schools have been mentioned. And like I said, my kids go to Werner Elementary. I'm like, it can't happen to me. No way. But it's possible. But ultimately, watching these videos, staying informed, staying engaged, looking at the Poudre School District facilities dashboard, which I will again link below in this description, paying attention to the board meetings, and if you have questions, reaching out, sending emails, inquire. I would say that's probably the best thing that you could do as a family of a kid that's in the Poudre School District. Now, my world, what does this mean for buyers and sellers? Because I think it is massively impactful. We have a relocation called the Living in Fort Collins YouTube channel, and essentially lots of people relocating from all over the country and world and within the state as well. And a big draw to them is the Poudre School District. For me, I'm kind of roll with the punches. If Werner does get closed or consolidated, we're gonna roll our kids into whether that be Bacon or Cruz, and again, just roll with the punches, and in a couple of years' time, it'll be like it never happened, and we'll have built a new kind of habit and routine around whatever school our kid ends up going to. But as a seller, I wouldn't necessarily panic sell at this point by any means, but I do think there is, not a ton of information out there, and if you're concerned about your elementary school closing and you think it's a massive asset or resource, prepping to get your house on the market and moved might be an opportunity before your school is on the chopping block and it's just kind of like, all right, well, it's October 2026. Our school is slated to close. Now on November 3rd, it is closed, and we have to wait this entire year knowing the school is going to close, and we don't know what that means for the neighborhood or people in it. So I wouldn't necessarily fear sell, but if that is a concern of yours, now before any type of major decisions gets made, could be an opportunity for you. Because I do think once your school is named, you could have some buyers come in and negotiate a little bit harder. You're gonna have the buyers saying, hey, listen, your school is recommended, your school is slated on the chopping block. We believe your house actually has decreased in value. To what extent, we don't know. But if you want to avoid those types of negotiations, you might want to move faster than slower. But my honest take, if you were planning on selling already, don't panic sell, but maybe the fall of 2026 sale is a little bit more of a consideration now with these recommendations coming in October and November than it was before. And we'd be happy to have these conversations with you, timing how quickly we can get property on the market. We're actually working with a couple listings right now where we're avoiding the July time period to list and looking to list in early August to kind of enjoy that fall seasonality. So if that's something that you're considering, reach out to us. We'd love to put together a strategy and proposal, get your house on the market, get that fall bump of home sales before that October and November slump and slow period. And as a buyer, this could actually be some opportunity for you, staying informed, staying, relevant, because, come this October, November, if there was a school that was slated and suggested to be closed, this could mean more negotiation power for you. If you don't have a kid in the Poudre School District system, ultimately, I think long-term, these areas maintain relatively strength and value. But in the short term, people will have unknowns, uncertainties, and as a buyer, this could be negotiation power for you. And a closed school nearby doesn't necessarily mean a tanked neighborhood, because again, there's going to be repurposing of these buildings, buying, selling, leasing it. There's zoning laws that will reduce what can be used and allowed in those areas. So it will be kind of in tune with the neighborhood of what ultimately these buildings are going to be used for. And yes, there might be a 1 to 2 year period while they sit vacant, get retrofit, or maybe a little bit longer, but ultimately they will be used and utilized in the area. Or if you are a buyer and you're concerned about this, reach out to us, talk to us. We can talk to you about kind of the schools that have strong current enrollment, future enrollment, lower building utilization. We can try to make our best guess of what schools will remain strong. But again, that will be a little bit of a guess, but there will be schools like Timmins Middle High. No chance that bad boy is closing because it's at peak enrollment. It's a brand new school. So that's a great area to consider. Wellington Middle High School, that school was just built, strong enrollment, strong future projections. We can have these discussions and be kind of analytical about what schools we think are going to remain. And again, that's going to be a little bit of a guessing game until that October 20th time period when they build out their recommendations. So high level consolidation, I actually think this could mean strength for the PSD system. The reality is all of our schools are a little bit under where they need to be. Birth rates are lower. Come on, young families, get to work, have more babies. And when you're based on a per pupil funding from the state, it's important to make sure that the longevity of the school systems remain strong. Don't just kind of limp them along, because I do think, in fact, you could impact negatively the education that a kiddo has because they're not getting maybe the PE, the arts, the music, the extracurriculars, the advanced programs, early childhood programs. Rather than force the situation, consolidate into fewer schools, provide all of the amenities and resources that kids want and need, and not necessarily just force a school to stay open because, it's a little bit closer of a drive. I talked with some friends that, that moved here from Houston. We chatted about how, the reality in Fort Collins is anywhere in Fort Collins is really a 15 to 20 minute drive. So if your elementary school gets closed, there's another one just a couple blocks away. A friend of mine, we are just talking about how they're going to choice into a school that's actually pretty close. It's like a few blocks further from them, but they have family in the area, and the school has all the resources that they were looking for. So they chose out of their neighborhood school and into a school that was just a little bit further. So as far as elementary, middle school, the transportation's really not going to be that much further. Some of these north, western types of people that are still in the Poudre School District in Larimer County, yes, you want to make sure that some of those travel and commute times aren't going to be impacted too bad. But if this video has helped you, and if you're considering buying or selling here in Fort Collins in Northern Colorado, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to have that conversation, an intro Zoom call. And whether you're looking at selling here this fall or selling here next spring, we'd love to get that ball rolling and be an asset and resource on your team. Hopefully this video has helped. Send it to somebody who has got a kiddo in the Poudre School District system that maybe doesn't know what all is going on. And until next time, watch one of these other videos that talks to you about the developments that are happening in Northern Colorado. This is Patrick Sugup, Fort Collins Lifestyle Channel. Appreciate you guys watching. Take care.